Good morning, everyone. Welcome to season two of VM Business Talk. Today, we are diving into a topic that's essential in both business and personal life, and that is negotiation. If you'd like to catch up on past episodes on business, marketing, and leadership, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Audible, and YouTube. We truly appreciate your follows, comments, and likes. That helps us bring even more conversations your way. My name is Diana Spinka. I'm a producer of this show. And as always, I'm here with our host, networking and marketing expert, Victor Nichols. Hello, Victor.
Well, hello. I'm so excited about this.
And I am thrilled to welcome today's guest, Damali Peterman. Good morning, Damali.
Good morning, Diana.
Damali is a highly regarded lawyer, mediator, negotiator, educator, speaker, and author. She just launched her second book, Be Who You Are to Get What You Want. And as someone who read the book, I can say that this isn't just like a simple guide to get successful negotiations. It's a powerful resource on self awareness, communication, and understanding the value you bring to the table. So it's so much more than just a negotiation book. Damali, thank you so much for being with us here today. And let's start, I guess, at the beginning. When did you realize how important negotiation was?
I probably realized how important negotiation was when I was a child, negotiating and advocating for myself and then for my siblings. I'm the oldest of 7 children. So I like to say that negotiation was a way of life, but also because I was in the middle of like parents and kids, that also made me a natural mediator.
That's so interesting. And I see that you also talk about your mom as a good negotiator, even though she didn't really realize it at that point. Do you think you got some skills from her?
100%. I would say that my personality is a lot like my mom's. My mother was raised by two my grandparents who are from the South, from South Carolina specifically, and so she's very charming, very personable. She's one of those people who really wants to understand what's going on, and she wants to help people. And she advocates for her children as if it's her, her first job, right? Um, so it's, or I should say, her main job. And so I definitely picked up her mannerisms, her style, and her approach in terms of being personable, which I do talk about in the book. And I think like what I've noticed about my mom over the many decades that I've known her now is that they just share things with her. Like she has a very welcoming and inviting um, just personality and aura. And I think because of that, people want to help her. They want to, like give her what she's asking for. So even from small things to big things, like what the story I describe in my book, where she's negotiating for me for my first job when I was 14 years old, growing up in Washington, D.C.
Awesome.
Yeah. What did you see missing in like society that inspired you to write this book? Because there are lots of books on communication, negotiations. What did you see missing that you felt like, oh my God, I'm gonna do something very different?
Well, I would say that something that I saw that a lot of the existing literature on negotiations had in common was that they seem to espouse this idea that if you imitate someone else's negotiation style, then you too would have the same success that they have, without any regard to the fact that you may be completely different in every way from that person, or that you might be seen by society, or in the environment that you occupy, among other things, as different. And so for me, I always found that even though I've read all the existing negotiating books that I could find, even though I continued to take negotiation courses, even at the highest levels, I always felt like there was something missing from those books because I didn't see a lot of experiences that I could always relate to. And I also didn't see diverse enough stories for me to be like, oh, well, is it okay for me to just be myself, because I've been doing pretty well as a negotiator, as an attorney, handling mergers and acquisitions, teaching negotiations. And for me, like it felt like that was missing, sort of giving people uh, sort of the okay or validating their experiences, and also saying you can be who you are and still get what you want. You don't have to be like X person to be successful in a negotiation. And in fact, once we start tapping into what your individual superpowers are, then we could figure out different ways to incorporate them into your everyday negotiations. I think what was also missing oftentimes was this idea that negotiations, or I guess something that wasn't missing, but something that I noticed was that there was this idea that people think that you only negotiate when you're um, in a boardroom, or when the stakes are high, or when there's you don't have other options. I actually think that negotiation is something that we do every day, right? When I woke up this morning and I was trying to decide if I had time to exercise or not, that was a negotiation I had with myself. So that's like a fun way to think about negotiation. But every day we have to make decisions and figure out what we're going to do, whether internally or externally. And so there's so many opportunities to negotiate. So I also wanted to demystify this idea that, negotiation only happens in certain areas or locations or environments, and that there's only one archetype of a negotiator. So that's
When you said that, it resonates for me because, as somebody who's, and I just want to interject this question because it's been on my mind ever since I read the book. I'm a salesman. I mean, I run businesses, I do all kinds of different things, but I think of myself affectionately as a salesman. Okay? And a lot of people have a negative connotation when they call me a salesman. I'm like, thank you. But with that, where do you delineate between sales and negotiation? And I realize that they're related, but I was really very curious to see your differentiation, if any, between a negotiation and a sales. Now, I know the technical difference, but I'm very curious to see what you feel about the difference between a sale and a negotiation.
I would say that negotiation is the bigger category and sales is
It's
under
not-
negotiation, right? Like sales is something that you are doing in a negotiation. The reason that I'm saying that is because I have different people tell me that they are a negotiator on a regular basis. And I'll pause and I'll say, well, wait, but you're a mom and I just saw you advocate for your child yesterday in the classroom when I was picking up my son. And so there are different ways that you can, so I would say advocacy is a negotiation. Sales is a negotiation. I would say that, yeah. So to me, I don't think they're different in terms of what people are trying to accomplish in the conversation. I think sales has a very clear, if someone is the salesperson, they're trying to convince you to purchase something or to buy into something, some idea or an item. Yeah, something. I think in a negotiation, and this would probably tie into a little bit into my foundational 5 framework. Say that really fast, foundational 5 framework, right? And so it's something that I think will tie into that. But for me, sales, what's essential in sales is that it's a negotiation. Like you want to convince someone to take something that you have or that you are representing that you can have or do for them. And then they are also considering, is this for me? And should I buy it? And you're having a back and forth. So at its core, a sales transaction is a negotiation. Even things as simple as this. I am the person that whoever had the genius idea of putting items in the aisle when you check out. Oh, that was made for me. That is a negotiation. When I'm standing in that line and whatever company, whatever store, and I'm like, oh, how did they know I needed this? I will go through, and that is a sales transaction, right? There's not a person there saying buy this or do that, but that is a transaction where I see it, and then I feel like I need it, or I definitely want it, and then I buy it. So, that's also mini negotiation. Do I need this? Do I want it? Should I buy it?
And I think putting the spotlight on that, people will start to think differently. I'm telling you, I did start thinking differently after I read your book. And it was just interesting, the shifts and things that I noticed, after reading the book and other people and the way they reacted. It was fascinating to me.
Yeah, it's so true, and it's so funny. I have people who have read the book, and that's exactly what they say, even about themselves. Like, I didn't see myself as a negotiator. I was in New Orleans in a cooking class with my mom and my sister, and we were there with 4 nurses. They were on a girls' trip, and I just wanted to learn how to make some delicious Cajun dishes. But my mom was proud that my book was coming out, so she was telling everyone in the cooking class, and my daughter has a book coming out, and that's wonderful and delightful. But then what that opened up was this conversation where these nurses said to me, "Oh, well, I wouldn't get the book because I don't negotiate." And I was like, "Do patients always do what you ask them to do?" And they're like, "No, usually they don't." And I'm like, "So what do you call that back and forth when you're talking to patients and you're trying to get them to do things?" And they're like, "Well, oh, I guess it's negotiation." Sure is, it's a negotiation. And so to me, it's so amazing how people negotiate on a regular basis and they don't see it as a negotiation. Um,
Right.
and so you're right, Vic, when sometimes, you might read something and I read, I love reading. I was an English major at Spelman. I love reading. I enjoy writing. But I might read something and be like, oh, I never thought about it like that. And that's what reading is supposed to do, right? It's supposed to set your brain on fire in terms of thinking of new things.
It opens up everything. So I cannot thank you more for writing this book, and it's going to be lots of fun to start applying it in certain areas.
Yeah, one of the first, I guess, major insights that I got from the book is when I was reading a part where you say, I even quoted this, dress and play the part to get a seat on the table. And a lot of people use that because they are told to dress and play the part to get a seat on the table, right? And you are talking that this is not the right approach because it doesn't work. And I was like putting it, on me. And I was like, so many times I tried to wear, like a mask, just like to be someone they wanted to see, to be a good person or like to be someone else. And it took so much energy that you like real you will come out eventually, right? And you also, I guess, I want to talk, about you say that be who you are, but so many people are afraid to do that because they want to be likable, right? They want people to love them, like in some shape or form. And I guess not everybody has the courage to show the true self because, like, what if they don't like me? What if they don't accept me? Do you have an advice on that part? On more like psychological part, I would say?
Yeah, so I'll say to tap into the two things that you said. The first thing about, being trying to fit into a mold and someone else's mold or trying to show up in the right space in the right place as you. Now, I want to make sure I'm very clear about this. I don't mean, for example, like if I your go-to style is something eclectic and eccentric and you're going to a very conservative meeting and you want to stand out that way. I want people to be thoughtful, right? I want people to
Right.
be thoughtful and
Learn to read the room, kind of.
read the room, to do some research about the culture, right? So even when I'm going into different places and spaces throughout the world, I do some research. I have, I think about how I should look if I'm going to a place that's very conservative. When I train the police department, right? When they had to come in and come to my trainings, first, that's like they get to wear whatever they want, right? So you get to see a little bit of their personalities because they're outside of, of their uniforms. For me, I still wanted to be like, the instructor figure, but I have some pretty cool shoes. And so for me, that's where I wanted to show my personality. It wasn't like I had on a whole, costume, but I would come in there with different shoes. And I will tell you that one day I was getting ready really quickly. I had 2 shoes that were the exact same, but one was navy and one was black. And because they were used to seeing me in different cool shoes every day, they would come in and they would kind of look at the shoes. So this time, one of them said, was there a reason that you have on blue shoe and one black shoe? Were you trying to see if we were going to be observant and pick up on the detail? First, I was mortified because I was like, I put on one blue shoe and one black shoe. But second, I leaned into that like, very embarrassing moment. And I talked about how sometimes you can learn about something about a person based on how they dress, how they look, but also by asking a question, right? They didn't assume what my intent was when I made a mistake and had on the wrong shoes. And so I say that all to say, you should definitely think about how you want to feel in that moment, whatever that means, right? So trying to fit someone else's mode, you may feel like an imposter. You may feel like, this feels very uncomfortable. I've been to so many meetings where people are wearing something that they think they should be wearing and they feel uncomfortable, and you can see that coming from them. You can feel that in the negotiation, right? You know that something's off. You may not be able to put your finger on it, and then later you may have a conversation in the ladies' room and they maybe say, oh, these are brand new shoes. I haven't broken them in yet. My feet are on fire. And that's why I can't focus, because, I can't feel my baby toe. Aside from that, your second question, Deanna, was more asking about the psychological aspect of negotiators, right?
Yeah.
And thinking about this fact that at its core, there are a lot of people who may fall into the category of wanting to be liked, right? I'm going to expand that and say wanting to be liked, wanting to be seen as smart, helpful, wanting to be respected. There's so many different needs and wants that people have. If you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, he's talking about different things that people have, including the psychological aspect of it, safety, all of these things. And essentially, you're right. Um, I think what's important, and I think this also ties into my foundational five framework, is just knowing what you need in that moment, right? So the foundational five framework are the five things you need to know in any negotiation, whether it's with yourself or with someone else, right? And so knowing what you need in that moment could be helpful. If what you need is to feel supported or liked or whatever it is, how do you get there? Is that something that you can control, right? There are
Mhm.
many things that we can't control in a negotiation. You can control how you see your needs. You can control how you communicate your needs. You can control the things that are within your power to control. And so sometimes people don't realize that they're people pleasers. Oftentimes in a negotiation, that can arise in different ways where a person finds themselves conceding more than they wanted to concede. I talk about that a little bit in the book in terms of knowing when to close a negotiation. So foundational five, know what you want, know what you need, know how to actively listen, know how to communicate, know when to close, right? And so I talk about that and know when to close. Did you give up too much? Did you get everything you needed? Did you, just kind of going through a checklist of different things that a person can think of. But for the psychological part of it, I've done so much research on psychology and negotiations. It's fascinating. And I have I think, a pretty thorough reference section in the back of the book that talks about these different things that go into how people think and see a transaction and also see an interaction. And so I have so many things I could talk about that for the rest of our time, but I suspect you don't want me to focus that much on on that question.
You mentioned, yeah, no, I mean, I would love to talk to you more than like 2 hours, but we just don't have that much time. You mentioned active listening, and I noticed that in a book, you don't present active listening as just like hearing what another person is saying, right? You present active listening as like this 3D, 4D kind of like experience where you see the mimics, you look at the body language, like you see all of that. Can you elaborate, like talk a little bit more?
Yeah, I think that people often, when they're preparing to present or to negotiate or to teach or fill in the blank, they're preparing to speak, right? They're preparing their points, even if they want to have an argument with their spouse or someone they're dating or negotiate with their child, they're thinking about what they want to say. It is rare that people prepare to listen, to receive information, right? Of course, that happens naturally in situations like a classroom. You pay to go to a program or attend a school, and you're paying to sit there and receive information. But when we're talking about negotiating and we're talking about communicating, it's rare that people actually think about how will I receive this information? And communication is two ways, right? It's input and output. So I think it's really important to think about active listening. I like how you described it as kind of being multidimensional. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I like that a lot because that's how it should feel. I was on the news yesterday, and when I was talking about active listening, and this is a particular segment directed towards teaching children how to de-escalate conflict or resolve conflict. But I think this applies to anyone, no matter if you are 5 years old or 100 years old. Before you say something, when you're listening to someone and that other person is speaking, before you say something, count to three in your mind and then say something. Why does, I mean, three is not a magic number. I just think a longer pause might be considered. Sometimes people might think, oh, this person isn't listening to me if you take too long. But if you count to three, that'll do a couple things. One, that'll give you an opportunity to respond thoughtfully as opposed to reacting too quickly. It'll also give your brain a chance to kind of utilize its executive function a little bit more. And maybe, just maybe, what you would have said before you counted to three would be different after you've given yourself a chance to fully internalize what they're saying. The mimicking, that's something that psychology has talked about for a long time, but essentially just repeating what you hear. That does a few things, and we use that in mediation all the time. Excuse me. So with repeating what you hear back is helpful for three things. One, it confirms to the person that you heard what they said, right? If you use some of their words, then they know that you've heard what they said. Two, if you say it back in your mind, kind of replay it, then you're also probably hearing it and receiving it and like hopefully better than you would have if you just started talking to refute every point or to ask clarifying questions or the whole litany of things that people do when they're supposed to be listening. And you know it. Everyone has been in that, has had that situation happen where you say something and then the person just kind of goes in like they were just waiting like double dutch to jump in and start talking, and you feel like they didn't hear you and you feel like they didn't because when people feel heard, by extension they feel understood, right? And so part of what active listening should do when you're doing it right, the person on the other side should feel heard and maybe they feel more understood. Understanding doesn't mean that you have an agreement. Doesn't mean you agree with each other. Doesn't mean you support what they're saying or you agree with every point they made, but you're having a conversation and communicating in a way where you are understanding what the other person is saying, and you're more likely to know what to do and how to react or respond if you understand the source of what they're talking about or where they're coming from. And if you listen first and speak last, you get more information to use when it is time for you to speak.
I feel like your book should be in high school curriculum, because it's so important for like not just adulthood, but like on like just for survival. uh,
It
Vic,
really should be a required handbook. And before you move away from that, Damali, it's something that I started practicing many years ago, and it's exactly in line with what you just said. When you join those networking groups and things like that, and I think I've said this before, maybe not on some other podcast, but when you set up a meeting with somebody, I would sit down with them if it's somebody I don't know, that I don't really know at all. And I sit down with them, I said, you know what, we're going to do something different today. And here's what we're going to do. I'm not going to tell you anything about me. No. I'm going to take out my pad. I'm going to take out my pen, and I want you to tell me every freaking thing you want me to know about you. Okay. And I'm going to listen without me trying to think about what I'm going to say next, without me trying to sell you anything. I'm going to listen. And it is so great because it does a couple of things, at least for me. One, I don't have to worry about having to say anything. That's one. I can focus on the listening. Plus, it tells me something about the person, because if that person doesn't say, you know what, Vic, that was really cool, and let's set up that next meeting so you can tell me everything about you, I learned everything I want to know. You know what I mean? So it's so, when I read that, I'm like, oh my God, he's right on point.
I love that. What a fun exercise too, because it also gives the other person a chance to think about what they want to share with you in that moment. You kind of give them their agency to do that. I love that.
Yeah, Vic, while you're on the live spot here, what was like the most insightful thing that you got from the book?
I think one of the things, and there were lots of insightful things that I got from the book, but I think one of the things about the book itself was the real stories about Damali's life and how she took those stories as learning experiences, but also took those opportunities to do things in a real way. And when you read the book, you'll know what I'm talking about, because I think I've said this to you before, but reading that book for me was so important the way it was written, because it helped me keep going. It flowed. It had pace. because you know me, Deanna, and Damali's getting to know me, and other people who are watching this who know I have a very, very tight attention span. So for me to sit down and read a whole book, that's a big deal. And I went through it, and when I was done with it, I'm like, wait a minute, is there some more here? I don't know that I'm quite done with this, And that, I think, was probably an eye-opening thing for me, was the care that was taken in mixing data, real empirical data and science, with real life things, and putting those together that you can relate to. And this book is for everybody. And like you said, Deanna, it should be required reading for everybody.
Yeah, I was very surprised to see breathing exercises because I am training to be a breathwork coach, and yeah, in a few months I'll get my certificate. And I was like, this is so cool because I try to put breathwork, like to introduce breathwork to everyone in any situation that I can, and like people come to me like, oh, I have a headache. I'm like, you know what I can advise, like, or like people like, oh, I want to lose some weight. I'm like, I have a solution for you. So, and like I was reading, I was like, this is so cool, and there are so many techniques, to lose the stress and to reduce the stress, and, to get, your self-awareness back, when you're in a stressful situation. But like square breathing was one of the most common, and one of the easiest, I would say.
I'm happy that you said that, both of you, especially about the way in which the book was written, and then some of the practical tips that people can utilize when they're negotiating. I will say I had so many stories, and if there are people who are listening or watching who want to write a book, I'll say something that I did for a long time and that I do just in general is I always have journals when I'm traveling. But when I was thinking about the book, and once the book was purchased by Penguin Random House, what I wanted to do was, I had to write a book. I was hired to write a book, but I also started just making notes on my phone, right? So I would either say it, dictate it into the phone, or I would just write it into my phone, and I always saved it as book, right? And so when I ended up putting all that into a Word document, and I was like, wow, this is like amazing. I have so many pages. Now that's not to say my editor liked all the stories I wrote. Sometimes I would like write a story and I'd be like, oh, this is it. This is the best thing I've ever written. And my editor would be like, no. And I'm like, what? I had to negotiate with her. And as you can see, most of those stories didn't make it. But the ones that did were, I'm happy that these are resonating with you, because, talking about them and thinking about them through and thinking about what each story should teach, right? Because that's the other thing. Storytelling is fun. I enjoy storytelling. I just enjoy speaking. Picking up a book and having to understand all the things that the writer wanted you to understand without any other context, without knowing me, without knowing my life experience, without knowing the work that I do or did as an attorney on a regular basis when I was negotiating big transactions. It's very hard to do. Not only that, they wanted this book to sit in two categories. So it's in the business section if you go into a bookstore, and it's also in personal growth, right? And what we used to call self-help, right? And so to write a book that can go into a university business level course and also be a book that a person wants to read while they're traveling is not easy to do. So striking that balance, not making it too dense, not making it too boring, thinking about how to appeal to different people across the world, right? So, for example, in the book, you may recall that I talk about Formula One, right? I use that as an example. I talk about the announcer who I love, who says "goal" during the soccer matches, the World Cup matches, right? Because that's more global and universal than American football, for example. So I was constantly thinking about like how to make the book more universal, how to make it appeal to a broader audience. And so I'm happy that you said it's for everyone, because it is for everyone. And I agree that getting the book earlier in your life, whether it's high school or middle school, is great, because the sooner you can start practicing some of these skills and techniques, the better you'll become at it. As an attorney, as a mediator, I always feel like there are so many opportunities for people to have resolved their conflict or diffused it before it escalated to needing a person like me to intervene. And so as I was writing the book, I was also thinking about that, like what can I put in here that this book can be also a reference book that people can go back to. So at the end of each chapter, you'll see a negotiation in real life toolkit, right? So there's like a quick guide of the highlights of the skills or lessons or techniques from that chapter that you could utilize. So you can go back and quickly take a look and say, oh, okay, I remember $1 million need, boom. Or I remember, this, be personable. Or I remember what's your unique value proposition, right? So all these types of things. And so I'm happy to hear that that's exactly how both of you felt when you were reading the book.
Are you?
Well,
I just had a quick question because you were on that line of thought. Are you looking to, or have you begun to look at institutions of higher education in high schools and junior highs and things like that to actually have them indoctrinate the book into their curriculums?
I haven't spoken with junior high schools and high schools. I have talked to some professors at colleges and universities because they determine what the curriculum is. So for, at college university, the professor who's teaching, they assign the reading and they pick the books that will go along with the curriculum. I haven't had any conversations with high school and middle school teachers. That being said, I have spoken with some academic deans who have been reading the book.
I would love to, which is on a side note, I would love to talk to some of the colleges and universities that we have relationships with, because I think they would be very interested in incorporating that into many of their, the curriculum that they have for many different topics.
Yeah, it's an easy read. It's a fun read, and it's chock full of techniques and tips that are helpful. So that makes it.
You read it. That's the thing. It's like you don't have to wait to use it. You're like, okay, I'm done with this book now. Let me go to the grocery store and use this.
It's true, like immediately. And it's also, I mean, we all have like the physical book, but it's also on Kindle, it's also on Audible. And funny story, when Penguin asked me if I wanted to narrate the book, I was like, sure, that sounds awesome. So that was like an added bonus to writing it. I went to a studio and I recorded the book. So
that is so amazing. Yeah, I guess, and it's also a great book to for a discussion. To discuss in classes, especially in schools, like with the students. And I have a few more questions. I have a lot more, but for these conversations, I will only have two more. First is, when did you discover your superpower, and when did you understand how to use it?
So that's a great question, Deanna. When I was in high school, I started to compete more in oratorical competitions. So I used to write, memorize, and then compete speaking. And I would win a lot. So it's interesting is sort of that internal, I think I can do this. I'm really good at this. And then that external validation of something that you do well. And so I realized that I had a way of moving people with words, especially with spoken words. Would win for my high school. I would win for Washington, D.C., where I'm from. I represent D.C. and, state, national competitions. And so that was probably something that I realized because, again, that external validation. Before that, I was really good at convincing, my family to do things, right? And, use your power for good. But I was really good at talking to my parents. And, you're the oldest. You're like kind of like the test kid, right? So, being able to do things is kind of tough because, there was no one before you to kind of help them prepare for allowing you to do things like get on a plane by yourself and go compete in an oratorical competition, which I was able to do when I was 14 for the first time, to compete in a competition that I later won. And so I that was something that I think I realized at a younger age in terms of talking. Something that I realized later in life was that some things that I thought I wasn't good at, so some things that I would say either I thought was a negative attribute, or that someone told me, like, my grandfather would say, oh, you talk too much, you read too much, go do something else. Now, I talk for a living. I've won awards. I won scholarships for school. I get paid to be keynote speaker, right? So it wasn't such a bad thing. And so I think, but for me, I think superpower goes hand in hand. People often talk about superpowers, in books and sometimes in motivational speeches. But I think when you're thinking about a superpower, the only way you can expand your toolbox is if you also think about something that you think you're not good at, or that someone has told you you're not good at, and then you should reframe how you view that. So usually I like to ask people, what's something that you're not good at? And people will say all sorts of things. I'm not good at being patient. I'm not good at getting consensus before I make decisions. I'm not good at listening. And then I'll say, well, when is it a good thing to be a person who doesn't get consensus? If there's an accident and you need someone to make a quick decision, you want that person who doesn't have time to get buy-in from everyone and makes a decision that might be something that saves your life. Sometimes you can't be patient. If something is wrong and you're getting information that's incorrect or not substantiated or whatever the case may be, then maybe you need to, interject so that you can kind of shift the conversation. Maybe you can't be patient to see if they get to a better place because they started somewhere, out of the box. And so I think the point is that there are different ways to reframe how we see ourselves. I think there are different ways to reframe how people see us, especially if they're making a snap judgment based on an implicit bias. I think there are different ways to reframe that. But a lot of it stems from you as an individual deciding how you want to be. Who do you want to be in that moment, and how do you want to be received in that moment? Because there are times where I want to show up and I want to be the cool mom, right? There are times where I want to be the person who's an expert on, this field, because that's where I spend a lot of my time, energy, education, and resources. And so it just depends. Like, what person do I want to be right now? How do I want to show up in this moment? Because we're all three-dimensional. We all wear more than one hat, if you want to use that sort of visual analogy. And I think it's important for us to decide how we want to be received in that moment, as opposed to just leaving it up to fate to determine how we're being received at that time.
That is awesome. So much value. Where people can buy your book? Tell us.
Yay, my book. So I should tell you that this is the paperback edition of the book that I published a year ago. And so the book is Be Who You Are to Get What You Want. And it's available everywhere that you buy books, everywhere you buy books. So you online and bookstores, if you go to your local independent bookstore, you can, if they don't have it in the store, I'd be very sad and disappointed and surprised. But if they don't, you can ask them to order it for you. I've seen my book so many places. It's one of my favorite things to do when I'm traveling. It's just to pop into a bookstore in the airport or in a city and just see if they have my book on the shelf. And then I see it and I take a picture with it. And then I never post a picture because I'm too busy and I forget. And so one day I'll have all these pictures of me in random bookstores and doing, year and a half of me taking photos of books. But it's great. So anywhere that you buy books, you can purchase this book. And what's great is it's light. The paperback version is light, but the hardcover version of the book is also still in circulation. So you can also get that book too. And then, as I mentioned, it's if you prefer to listen to it. I have to drive a lot, so I'm often listening to something. It's an Audible, I think it's in Google Play. And it's also in many e-reader versions too, including Kindle, among others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the last question for today. If our listeners could walk away remembering just one thing from this conversation, what would you want it to be?
Just one thing from this conversation. I would say that, it's funny. When I get this question a lot, and I feel like I always give the same answer. So I'm going to give a different answer this time. I think if I want to challenge everyone who's tuning in to think of what their superpower is. So you might have more than one. And maybe if you can't think of it because, it's hard to think of like what you're good at personally, and that can happen, then think about what someone has told you that you do very well, that you're good at, right? And remember that people don't always see us the way we see ourselves, which is interesting. It's very interesting. And so that's 1A. 1B is to then think about something that you think you're not good at, right? Oh, I'm not good at fill in the blank. And then think about how that might come in handy. And actually, instead of being in sort of the minuses category, it's in the plus category.
That's powerful.
That's a very good one. Thank you so much. Vic, what would be one thing that you're taking from this conversation?
I think from the conversation and also from the book itself, I think the authenticity message that is throughout the entire book, from every chapter that you read, I don't know that we can really drive home the idea of authenticity enough. I really don't, because obviously we see all the things that are going on in the world and the people that you meet and the people who are fake and all of those other pieces. But I think in your own lives, whether you're trying to achieve something business-wise, personal-wise, relationship-wise, whatever it is, the authenticity piece, I think, is overlooked. People say it, but I'm not sure that everybody's playing it. So I would really say, when you read this book, do always in your mind come back to the authenticity piece, because that's what's going to get you to where you want to be. Period. So that to me is the biggest piece from this book. And this conversation.
Thank you both so much. Vic, thank you for providing this space.
Sure.
Damali, thank you so much for spending this time with us. I said that it's going to be 30 minutes, but I honestly it's been 41 and I want to keep talking. But I hope to see you very soon in our another episode, because I think there are so many things that we can talk about. You have so much knowledge on so many aspects of our lives, and thank you so much for providing this value.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed our time together, and I hope that everyone goes out and reads the book.
Yeah, I do too, and I love the fact that it is on Audible too, because that actually really, really spreads out what your options are in order to take in this information.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you so much for everyone who was listening, and I'll see you all in the next episode.
Terrific.